Well, let's begin our coverage in Cairo, where protests are no closer to settling down after the Egyptian military deposed President Mohamed Morsi and his government last Wednesday. Instead, dual protests are underway in the country, some supporting Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, and others backing the military and the opposition. At least 51 people were killed in today's clashes alone, bringing the death toll count to around 150, and those are conservative estimates. At least 5 children were among the dead. Meanwhile, Egypt's army chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his troops are attempting to restore order in the country using tactics protesters say are tantamount to outright suppression. And Egypt's top Muslim cleric is now warning the people of an all-out civil war. Earlier today, I was joined by RT's Paula Sleer in Cairo for the very latest.
Well, as you can see, I'm standing here in Tahrir Square. There's still a crowd here, although significantly smaller than it has been on previous evenings. The focal point this evening is really on the pro-Morsi demonstrators, which are about a 20-minute drive away from where I'm standing. They are calling what happened this morning, the death of some 51 people and some 233 people injured, a massacre. What they're saying is that they want the army to answer for what they say was the army's execution of their members. We're hearing conflicting reports in terms of exactly what happened this morning. The army saying that they were acting in self-defense, but the Muslim Brotherhood supporters saying that they were attacked while quietly praying in the pre-dawn hours of this morning. There needs to be some kind of clarity, but certainly tension is running high and a lot of anger on the streets of Egypt tonight.
Now, as I understand it, economists say that the protests are not really that surprising. Can you explain why that is, and also the financial toll that these protests are taking on the country?
Well, certainly the protests are political in nature, but they're underpinned by the very real economic issues that this country faces. If you look at these statistics, some 40% of Egyptians live below the poverty line, which is some $3 a day. At the same time, this country faces massive unemployment. You have food prices that have hiked. You have an economy that's not growing. You have international investors that are pulling out. Against the backdrop of all of that, this revolution, or for want of a better word, these protests are costing the Egyptian economy some $1 billion a year. Now, one of the reasons given for why Mohamed Morsi became so unpopular after just 1 year in office is partly because he spent that year trying to consolidate his grip on power on the country. People here are saying he did not spend enough time addressing the real economic concerns that they have. So this new interim government that is being established is going to have to place a lot of attention on economic concerns. But first and foremost, we need an interim government to be formed. And here the interim president is struggling to find a prime minister and to find other government ministers to make up this government that would be acceptable to all sides of the opposition as well as the supporters of Morsi.
So, Paula, let's talk about that. Some Egyptians are saying that they want a new constitution to be drafted first. Others are saying that they want a new election first. Is there any idea what will happen first and what would possibly be better politically for the country in order to ensure stability?
No, there's really no clear indication of what goes next. I mean, this is uncharted water. The word from the army is that they're temporarily in control. They say that they've dissolved the constitution. They're going to call for fresh parliamentary and presidential elections. At the same time, they're going to put forward some kind of roadmap. The question is, of course, whether or not they stick true to their word. And there is a lot of concern on the Egyptian street that the army is not going to hand over to civilian rule. But let's put that aside for a moment and assume that they are. Even if they do, there needs to be some kind of interim establishment in the meantime. And here, as I say to you, we have a problem with the current interim president who 2 days before his announcement had just been appointed the head of the Constitutional Court here. He needs to find a government that is satisfactory to all the parties. The name Mohamed al-Baradei is being bandied about. He is the former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. He's now being put forward as the deputy president. There's a popular left-wing lawyer who's being bandied about to be the possible prime minister, a man by the name of Ziad Baha el-Din. But again, because you have so many different conflicting political viewpoints, it's going to be quite touchy to try and get everybody to agree to all of this. And then what's the next step? Well, the next step really is drafting a new constitution, having new elections, but you're also going to have to deal with the very real popular anger on the street. And while all of that political progress is hopefully going to happen one day, you have the very real threat of further clashes, further demonstrations and further instability here in Egypt.
And Paula, I'm very glad that you brought up the name Mohammed El-Baradei, because that name was thrown out as being prime minister, the next prime minister. It wasn't only thrown out, it was announced and then rolled back. And that was because of the Salafist Noor Party. They rejected him and spoke out against him. So if the Noor Party is so much a part of this process, this Islamic group is so much a part of this process, are we repeating history here? What does it say about the role that Islamist groups continue to play in that country?
There certainly is a sense that history is repeating itself. On the point of Mohammed El-Baradei, there's a lot of skepticism around him by those who feel that he's really, for lack of a better way of putting it, a puppet of the West. You need to remember that he did stand for the presidency some 2 years ago. He did not get in. The criticism at that stage was that he's too tightly aligned with Washington, and it's still a criticism that surfaces today. There's a lot of anger on the streets towards the United States, and it's noticeably growing. I mean, I was on the streets, let's say, a week ago, and there's never been much popular support for Washington. But certainly this morning, when I was busy filming and talking to demonstrators, they blame the United States. A lot of them say that they pushed Morsi to come to power, particularly here in Tahrir Square. People are very anti-America. So Mohammed El-Baradei fits into that camp, and he doesn't have the credibility of a lot of Egyptians. When it comes to the Islamists, they too are very critical. I mean, they're divided amongst themselves. You need to remember you have a party like the Noor Party, which is the second largest Islamist party in this country. It's a hardline Islamist party, and it was part of the negotiations up until this morning. This morning, when you had the massacre, which is essentially what the Muslim Brotherhood is calling the deaths of more than 50 people, then the Noor Party withdrew from talks and says that they're not going to have anything to do with negotiations. There needs to be international intervention. That's what they're calling for. They're also, and here I'm quoting the Brotherhood, saying that there needs to be urgent intervention before this country turns into a second Syria. So you have these allegations of the United States and the West being involved. As for the Islamists, there's growing concerns that Morsi was applying his own agenda. He was turning this country into a more Islamist state. And of course, this is a big concern, not only for the Christians in this country, but for the more moderate Islamist Egyptians as well. So there's a lot of issues at play here. And I think the fairest way to summarize the situation is to say there's a lot of confusion, a lot of anger, and a lot of issues that an interim government needs to address, and address quickly.
It's a very volatile situation in Egypt right now, and there's no saying when these protests will end and who will end up in power at the end of it. RT Middle East Bureau Chief Paula Slier.